Today, we're going to talk about your rights if you're an Ontario or Canadian resident injured down south in Florida. Hi, I'm Andrew Iacobelli, and I'm a personal injury lawyer with Iacobelli Law Firm. This is a really enjoyable topic for me in particular because I practice in Ontario and in the state of Florida. We actually have offices in Palm Beach County, Florida, and offices here in Ontario. It's really, unfortunately, common that Canadians, snowbirds, people traveling for business, recreation, etc., end up in an accident while traveling in the state of Florida. For a Canadian, usually the first question is, what do I do now? I'm away from home, I've just been involved in a car accident, and there's a bunch of questions that arise from that, including, do I get health care in the United States? How do I pay for health care? Do I need to go home immediately? Do I need a lawyer here in Florida, or do I need a lawyer in Ontario? Just like an accident anywhere else in the world, the first thing you want to do is make sure it's reported to the police. You want a police report immediately because that's going to secure the evidence of what happened on the scene of the accident. It's also going to help you with your insurance claims if you need to bring claims for your injuries. Second, get medical treatment. Even though you're a Canadian and you're concerned about healthcare costs in the United States, your well-being is first and foremost, so we highly recommend that you do get treatment immediately. If an ambulance comes to the scene and suggests that you be taken to a hospital, you should go. And if you don't go to the hospital, you should at least go to an urgent care center and get checked out before you can make it back home to Canada. We hear all these stories about expensive medical bills in the United States, and that's true. Healthcare expenses can be much, much higher. In some circumstances, hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the severity of the injury and the level of healthcare. In most circumstances, there will be insurance that will cover your healthcare expenses. Florida hospitals and healthcare providers will work with you and your insurance so that the bill can be paid fairly and reasonably. What do I mean by that? If you have extended health coverage through your employer or through a spouse or family member, very often that healthcare coverage will provide for emergency healthcare while traveling in the United States. There's some coverage provided by the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, actually. So a little bit of coverage might be provided through the Ontario government. Travel insurance. So if you purchase travel insurance, then you would have healthcare coverage if you purchased it at the time you booked your trip, or sometimes people just have it on an annual basis. Finally, if you don't have any of those avenues for recourse, typically the auto insurance would pay for some or all of the healthcare related expenses after a car accident. So if it was a car accident, there would be recourse against the at-fault party to cover your healthcare expenses, but also your own Ontario auto insurance could provide some coverage for your healthcare expenses in the immediate aftermath of a car accident. Third, speak to a lawyer as soon as you can. As daunting as U.S. healthcare expenses might be, put your healthcare first and your well-being first, and then let us help you get it paid for through the various avenues we've talked about. Should you be speaking to your lawyer back in Canada, or should you be speaking to a lawyer in Florida? Typically, it's both. And that's where we've been able to sort of carve out a unique service for Canadians injured in Florida because we do work in both Canada and the United States. Your claim, while it will be governed by the laws of Florida and initially commenced in Florida, there are parts of that claim and there are insurance benefits that also come from your Canadian auto insurance. And so it's important to get the advice of a lawyer that understands the claims on both sides of the borders, because in almost all circumstances, with few exceptions, you will have claims on both sides of the border. So then the question becomes, when you're well enough to travel, do you come back to Canada, or are you required to stay in the United States during the pendency of your claim? If you're healthy and well enough that you can travel, there is no requirement that you stay in the United States in order to advance your claim. So we can advance your claim for you in Florida against the at-fault driver, even though you've left the state. But as a general rule, you're not required to remain in the state of Florida. If a Canadian calls us and says they were recently involved in a car accident while visiting Florida, our first step is to act on their behalf as a Florida attorney. And we would collect the medical records, the police report, put the appropriate parties on notice and their insurance companies, and really start to advance your case in the state of Florida. At the same time, we would engage our Ontario firm to assist you with the rights and benefits that you have through your insurance here in Ontario. That would be your statutory accident benefits, which would cover things like income loss, some of your healthcare expenses. Now, very often, vehicles in Florida have less insurance. And so that often will create a situation that's referred to as an underinsured motorist claim. Maybe it has no insurance at all, because in the state of Florida, cars are not required to have third-party liability. So they might not have any insurance to cover your pain and suffering, your medical expenses, or they could have little. They could have $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, whatever it may be. But if the insurance is less than sufficient to compensate for your pain and suffering, healthcare, income loss, etc. Okay, so fortunately, your Ontario policy has coverage for those exact claims, for underinsured motorist claims. Here's the interesting part. Although that claim then transfers, or part of the claim may transfer to the Ontario auto policy, Florida law still applies. Because the accident occurred in the state of Florida, Florida law applies with respect to liability, because that's the place where the accident occurred. Oftentimes, if a Canadian has started off with a lawyer only in the state of Florida, we end up getting involved later. Usually around a year later, we get a call from either that client saying, hey, I've got a Florida attorney. It turns out there's no insurance in Florida. What can I do? Or more often, it's actually from the lawyer. When a Canadian calls us, we're able to help on both sides of the border. You probably have more questions about your rights and remedies if you're a Canadian injured in Florida. We wrote this book just for you. It gives you some guidance on some important steps to take following an accident. Give us a call. We're happy to give you a complimentary copy of the book and just have a consult with you and answer any questions you might have. We hope you found this informative. We look forward to working with you and helping you in your cross-border accident claim.